Good afternoon and welcome to the annual general meeting of Vulcan Energy. My name is Francis Vidine and I'm the Executive Chair of Vulcan Energy. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this meeting is held, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Vulcan operates principally in the Upper Rhine Valley of Germany and France, an area of rich cultural heritage and local peoples. Vulcan cherishes this cultural inheritance and takes the necessary steps to preserve and protect cultural heritage in its operations. I've been informed there is a quorum present. Therefore, the meeting is properly constituted and I declare the meeting open at 3 p.m. Please ensure you've signed the attendance register. I would like to acknowledge the directors of the company, some of whom have joined the AGM virtually today. Directors, please briefly introduce yourself, and for those dialing in, please also state where you're dialing in from. Perhaps firstly, I should introduce, for those of you who haven't met him before, Managing Director and CEO, Chris Marino. Executive Director and Group Chief Financial Officer, Felicity Gooding. Lead Independent Director and Deputy Chair, Angus Barker. Non-Executive Director, Josephine Bush. Would you mind saying hello, Josephine?
Good afternoon, everyone. Josephine Bush. I'm Chair of the Audit, Risk and ESG Committee. I'm dialing in from the UK.
Thank you, Josephine. Non-Executive Director, Roberto Gallardo.
Hi, hello, Francis. Roberto Gallardo. I'm calling from Sydney today.
Thank you, Roberto. Non-Executive Director, Dr. Günther Hilken.
Good afternoon. This is Günther Hilken calling in from Germany.
And Non-Executive Director, Dr. Heidi Grön.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm calling in from Germany.
Thank you, Heidi. For the benefit of all in attendance, may I ask that you please turn off your mobile phone or switch it to silent mode. I would now like to invite Managing Director and CEO Chris Marino to provide a progress update on the status of our flagship Lionheart project on this very special day after this very momentous year. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Francis, and good afternoon, shareholders. Good afternoon to the board, the directors, to the Vulcan staff, and to other key stakeholders. What a year it has been for Vulcan, indeed. A lot to be proud of. We actually gathered this time last year where we were basically a development company and focused on pretty much a single critical milestone. It was a critical activity. It was an objective, and that was securing financing for our flagship Lionheart project. It was an ambitious goal and one that would define our future. In December 2025, we achieved that goal with a record financing package that has transformed our company and positioned us for the next chapter of growth. With financing secured, we've transitioned from planning to execution, and now we move swiftly into construction and project delivery. However, Today, we stand fundamentally as a different company. We are no longer focused on what could be achieved, and we're now focused on what we will achieve, and we're delivering that today. Project Lionheart is quickly and rapidly becoming reality, and with every milestone, we move closer to our vision and our mission to become Europe's first and largest lithium producer and geothermal producer. That's a lot to be proud of. So thank you for everyone in the last year who's been part of that. I will provide you an update on where we are as a company and proudly do so, and we can talk about and have Q&A towards the end. Standard disclaimer, and I think something that I will never get tired of saying is that Vulcan Energy being the next producer of lithium for the battery industry. What is Vulcan? For those new shareholders, for those new to the story, Vulcan is lots of things. Apart from a god, and we're also a lithium chemical and geothermal company. It's important that we don't lose sight of both of those things because it provides us huge advantage being both an integrated lithium and energy provider. And of course, we do this without fossil fuels, something that we've had since the onset. There's lots of things that characterize Vulcan. Currently, we have this incredible tier 1 resource in the Upper Rhine Valley of Germany and also in France. This is significant because this geological setting provides us a naturally heated, very low impurity brine, which is how we create a low cost production of our lithium, which makes us globally extremely competitive. But the scale is also very large. We have 17 licenses up and down the Upper Rhine, and this amounts to around 29.1 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. That is globally significant. Our first phase of production, what we'd like to call Lionheart, is targeting a 24,000 tonne per annum lithium hydroxide monohydrate project. It's an integrated supply chain, but we also produce a lot of energy which is important to our communities, both in heat and in power. And we're going to do that for at least 30 years. Funding, again, has been a huge part of the company's life for the last few years, and securing the 2.2 billion package last December. And only this morning, we announced the closing of that financing package gives us that runway to deliver this flagship project. And we've done that because we are low cost in quartile. We've got offtake contracts for the first 10 years, and that enabled the Vulcan board to take a positive final investment decision last December. And growth is going to be an important part of our story in the near future as well. We've got this huge endowment up and down the Upper Rhine. Phase 1 will be a part of that, but it's also on us to grow the company and deliver on that broader resource. We talk a bit more about product flexibility. We believe that being a lithium company means you have to be agile and understand how chemistries will change within the battery industry. And Vulcan's set themselves to be able to pivot and manage that battery industry as it moves. We'll talk a bit more about that when I announce some of the exciting stuff in our future phases. And last but not least, we really believe that, strategically and obviously geopolitically, we have some, really incredible tailwinds that are supporting Vulcan to be the partner of choice within Europe, hopefully globally, as we start to localize and create resilience in supply chains in Europe. And you'll see the demand is not going to be an issue within Europe, that's for sure. Corporate snapshot, we're a slightly bigger company these days, good market cap, and we've got some very strong partners on the register. And so we're very proud of the composition that we currently have as we grow the Vulcan company. Project Lionheart, I could talk about it every day, which I do, but all day, every day. For those who aren't familiar with the Upper Rhine Valley, a very, very industrialized part of the world, and very, very big part of the German society where we've got different pockets of, farming, industry, localization. And what Vulcan has done is we've created a supply chain where we basically find a resource. In our case, it's this really nice geothermally heated lithium brine. And we've decided to start our phase 1 project in an area called Landau. Landau is where we've got 2 existing geothermal power plants, which have been hugely important to demonstrate how we extract lithium and then how do we create that final supply chain. So that's what you see in the bottom left-hand corner. That's our field development for Lionheart. We've been, letting people know that we're drilling wells. We're starting to see construction at all our sites, and that's what's going to come out of life really in the next sort of 2 years, how we build the upstream and Lionheart. But that's not all. That's only the upstream part of the project. And, when you make that, comparative to what you see in Australia and other parts, that's really the mine up in, the Pilbara, or the mine down in the south. But we also have the downstream conversion. We actually make a battery chemical called lithium hydroxide. We don't do that in Landau. We actually travel around 130 kilometers up the Rhine. And in Frankfurt, in a very unique, and in fact, the oldest industrial park in Europe, called Industrial Park Höchst, that's where we have a central lithium plant. It's actually where we create the battery grade material called lithium hydroxide monohydrate. Ultimately, that's one of the shortest lithium supply chains you will ever see. And that's what makes, Vulcan quite unique. And it's actually what, makes us very important to Europe, is that we're very insulated in a world which needs insulation right now. It's a world where you can't really trust external supply chains, and we can do all this within our own backyard in the southwest of Germany. In process sense, and I'm guilty of being a chemical engineer, if not a process engineer, and a proud one, this looks sometimes analogous more to an oil and gas project than a mining project. We have a relatively well-known process here in the fact that we have a resource. It's called the Bunte sandstone. It's a wonderful sandstone in the German geology, and we've got a huge resource that we drill deep wells into. These wells are drilled, and we pump hot brine to the surface. And it's actually that time is where Germany, in particular, has been producing a lot of geothermal energy for decades and decades. So we follow the exact same process. We pump this hot brine to the surface. We extract about 100 degrees of energy, and we make local green energy, power and heat for our communities. And that's a huge social license to operate by that one activity. It also helps us, obviously, with our partners and obviously with government being able to really promote that, localization and regionalization of energy. But that's not where it ends. Once we've removed that energy and we've made that green energy, we have a waste product. It's a lithium-rich cooled brine. And it's actually that is what we feed our lithium extraction plant. And it's actually that we then extract using our own IP, our own Voltec technology. It's a direct lithium extraction technology that we've spent a lot of time perfecting. And we extract the lithium at 95% efficiency. And then we actually re-inject the remainder of that brine back into the subsurface. There's no tailings. It's fully circular. We don't have that. We don't have that headache of having to manage waste. Once we've extracted that lithium chloride, we do a bit of impurity removal, a wee bit of concentration, and that's when we actually truck that up the road to Frankfurt in 100 kilometers. Very, very quick, very, very short, very, very insulated. And we are producing lithium hydroxide for our phase 1 development. It doesn't mean that we'll only produce lithium hydroxide. We'll talk a bit about that in a moment. And we're fortunate that even our offtake partners for phase 1 are all very local, within Europe, either side of us. So again, you see how protected we are and insulated we are with the overall project. And in current, global tensions, it's probably a good thing to have. Numbers do tell you a few things about the project. I think importantly for me, apart from closing the financing package this morning, we are really one of the only lithium projects that's actually funded. Noting that we actually funded this project at the bottom of the lithium market. It should be a signal to most how resilient our project and our economics are by the fact that we could do so. And if I was going to point out 2 or 3 numbers from the economics of our project, the first one is definitely right in the middle. The reason why we've been so heavily supported by government and grants, equity partners, debt, is because we are extremely competitive on a global scale. That 3,500 per tonne shows that we can produce at literally global standards right at the bottom of the cost curve, which I'll show you in a second. If we didn't have that, we would be in strife against what happens in price manipulated worlds or worlds where price can be adjusted. However, because we produce at such a low cost of production, that affords us a luxury that we can be somewhat confident no matter the price environment, we will always make money. And then the second number to note is the price. And in the top right-hand corner, you see an average price for the first 10 years. Now, that's 20,000 euros per tonne. So if you're thinking about how we look at margins, well, we produce at 3,500 and we sell at an average of 20. That's what provides us our margins, our EBITDA, and that's based on actually prices from last year. So we feel like we're in a very unique position. We don't think we could have raised 2.2 billion euros if we didn't have these facets of our project and of our company. So I really believe we're in a good position. And last but not least, that 29.1 million tonnes tells you a bit about growth. It tells you about the future. We're only using 2 of our 17 licenses for phase 1. So we've got a lot of growth. And that's actually upon us to understand how we're going to grow that those future phases. I won't spend too much time on this. It's, again, more for information. We clearly sit heavily embedded in that bottom quartile. It's exactly where we want to be. I do draw your attention to the blue colors. Blue means effectively a brine project. And what you can see in the bottom 2 quartiles, effectively it's littered with blue. And that's effectively what's going to happen, and we believe is going to redefine the lithium industry in the next few decades. You're going to see strong investment on people flattening out that curve. And I'll show you some of the companies that are doing that. It's not just Vulcan Energy, but it does tell you that the smart money is moving to basically being a low-cost operator of lithium. We're proudly embedded there, but I also believe that we can also do better. And that's something we're going to have to demonstrate in future phases as well. And that's something we're hopefully going to bring to market very soon. Again, we talked about that low cost of production, but I think what is probably even more unique in the current environment, particularly last year when lithium prices were very depressed, Vulcan had a very unique set of offtake partners. It was a strong diversification of a trading company in Glencore, very large, if not Europe's largest cathode maker in Umicore, LG, second largest battery maker in the world, heavily embedded in Europe as well in LG, and then Stellantis, one of the largest automakers in the world, and still a major shareholder of the Vulcan Group. That diversification has allowed us to create a very strong pricing basket, which gives us pretty much protection. And that's what that bottom right-hand curve is showing you, or that pie graph. We are heavily protected on the downside, and which is really important when you're doing project finance and you're thinking about the banks and them lending you a lot of money. They're quite a conservative bunch, and that's something you really need to consider at the onset on how you're going to basically protect that payback. But this gives the Vulcan team and the Vulcan group huge protection as well. It doesn't mean we take away all the upside, far from it. We've got very good collars, meaning we've got price floors and price ceilings. And I was telling Francis, I'll be very, very happy if we hit the price ceiling, one of the happiest CEOs. So let's hope that that does happen one day. But this is what, again, isn't required to deliver these type of projects. 10 years of 100% of the volume sold for the Lionheart project. So quite a unique position to be in. We've talked a lot about financing. I look at our CFO, who's been instrumental in helping us get to this point, along with the rest of the Vulcan group. It can be seen as complex. I can agree to that. But let's summarize this very quickly. 2.2 billion euros were raised across a mix of grant money, very heavily supported by the German government. We received a lot of debt, which was underpinned and cornerstone by the world's biggest bank, the European Investment Bank. And then we also had the German government via both grants and equity. KfW also be a huge now shareholder of our holding group in Germany. The banks have been instrumental. As you can see, there's a lot of export credit agencies on this, a lot of banks from different governments supporting this, underpinned by the EIB. And in December, we signed that package. But I can tell you that wasn't the end. And in the last 5 months, the Vulcan team has been working feverishly to close nearly 800 CPs to basically announce this morning that we've now secured and closed the financing. So that's a wonderful outcome for us. It gives us the runway we need. We would now go through standard drawdowns and meetings, obviously milestones along the way. But this is a great outcome for Vulcan, and really, really happy to announce that on the day of the AGM. My favorite part is building it. I'll be honest, it's all I've done for most of my career. We've had the luxury of really getting off to a fast start, but that's not by luck, I can guarantee you. That's hard work, it's design, and it's experience. Vulcan has been preparing for this moment since Francis started the company a number of years ago. However, we've really got into earnest about preparatory work, probably about 12 to 18 months ago. And that shows by the fact that we are really delivering on all facets of the project to date. It's great to celebrate it with, prime ministers, state ministers, the federal governments, key shareholders. So you'll see that we'll continue to update the market with progress. We want to be really transparent and very visible here. We want to bring our shareholders on the journey with us as well. So please bear with us. You're going to see a lot of me, hopefully announcing to you guys that we're progressing. And yeah, we'll keep you updated as part of our quarterly process. Probably a few more photos. I could look at them all day, but yes, we're getting very, very busy at all the sites, and even our second well site in Trappelberg, we're starting to get ready for drilling at our new well site. A bit on the lithium market because it's moving quite fast. I must admit, you sort of open up your browser every day. It's hard not to run a lithium company and not be aware of what's happening globally. I'm sure Francis does the same. In fact, he messages me every morning at 5 a.m. to remind me. But electrification is becoming quite rapid, particularly in the jurisdiction we're working in Europe. It's a huge market. They're obviously devoid of natural resources. So for them, this becomes even more parallel. But if you just step back and just look at it globally, which I think is a fair enough assessment, BEV, battery electric vehicles surged 22% again last year, and even higher in Europe. Huge numbers in Europe. And I guess the direction of travel is only going one way. That was already the case before the conflict. And all the conflict is doing now is accelerating that even further. You then couple that with what's happening globally with data centers, with renewable energy, when a stationary battery is more important than ever. And they're all moving to lithium-ion batteries to support this wave of AI and data centers as well. So this is all moving, and there's only one path. And I guess where Vulcan really believes that we're uniquely positioned is to be able to take that market share, being the only integrated supply chain in Europe. But there's another story happening. And, Francis was actually in Hong Kong a few weeks ago. So he actually saw this firsthand, talking to a lot of the Asian battery players. And Europe is clearly the next market. Clearly, China has been dominating for a decade. We know 50% of all cars and registered sales are BEVs in China. Trucks are starting to appear. I'm sure there'll be all other things, planes, automobiles. But importantly, where Europe needs to catch up is really where the battery industry from China can support them to continue being an automotive jurisdiction. And that's what's happening. Europe is opening up arms to allow Asian players to come into Europe on a few provisos, that they bring their technology, they bring their experience in technology, but they deliver through Europeans. Now, this is a good thing for Vulcan. It's a very good thing, because what happens is that you need to create the entire supply chain. That's a widget, it's a bolt, it's a lithium molecule, it's a battery. So Vulcan, again, is uniquely positioned with, the largest resource in Europe. We're fully funded. We're going to deliver our phase 1. But, some of the partners on this screen should also be familiar, the likes of Stellantis, who are actually moving quite fast to adopt this method, either buying Chinese companies that have batteries, EVs, or otherwise, starting to create joint ventures with them. And that deepens the tie, not just with Stellantis, but hopefully with us as well, being, one of the largest off-takers within our group. And of course, this opens up opportunities for Vulcan moving forward. This is really an acceleration story, and I think you'll see more and more about this in the near future. So Vulcan is poised to capture the move and that supercharged moment from Asia coming into Europe. I think what should be known, hopefully, to most in the room today and online is that there's clearly a macro dynamics. It's typically supply and demand that drives price. We have seen some real issues in providing supply this year, particularly from China. There's been a lot of environmental issues, and then there's been things in other continents that are not supplying the hard rock that they need to China. And so that's seeing generally a shift between supply, which, in 2023, 2024, 2025, you are oversupplied. That's very, very quickly dwindling. And that dwindling, you can see, is clearly a response in price. So since September, October, December last year, we were seeing prices below 10,000. We're nearly 130% above that at the moment, circa 24, 25,000 per tonne. So, we believe genuinely that's the correction that should have happened. I still think there's some pain to go on the supply side from China. That's my personal view. And to be honest, last time I checked, there wasn't a lot of final investment decisions from lithium companies in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, Vulcan's one of few, if the only one. So this does set up for a structural deficiency come the end of the decade, exactly when we come into production. So I think we become an extremely important part of the solution, but we're not the only solution, of course. But this will have, I think, a marked impact on price. That's for sure. I guess the issue and the bottleneck, and I guess the concern, if we focus on Europe, is that they account for around 20% of global demand, and they actually produce less than 1% of lithium. So that's a problem for them, particularly when they're looking to create sovereignty. They're trying to protect themselves, both in energy and both in what this supply chain needs to provide, protecting their automotive industry. So again, their independence is no longer lost to them. They've had a tough ride with the Ukraine war. They've had a tough ride now with China exports, and now they've had a tough ride with having Iran. This is a non-negotiable for the European Commission. So again, we believe we're in a really unique position to capitalize on this. There's nearly 200 billion million euros committed across the EV ecosystem. And as you can see, those blue bars are the demand from Europe. And we're the teal color, where we provide a little bit of the solution, but not the entire solution, that's for sure. So really believe that Vulcan can do a lot of things within this current market. And last but not least, and I think it's something that we want to bang the drum a little bit more in the near future, that direct lithium extraction, and in particular what we do, adsorption, it is becoming the industry choice. I was listening to Francis on a panel yesterday on the AFR on this very, very topic, and I think there was a lot of commonality on what DLE provides. There's a lot of big investment coming in by some of the smallest companies I've seen on the left-hand side here, just some small oil and gas companies and small mining companies. But importantly, DLE already amounts for 10%, greater than 10% of global production. So it's a well-known process, and it's been in production since 1996. The most important part of this slide, and what I want to leave you with, is that Vulcan has spent a lot of its time, its effort, and its money in the upstream in creating an IP which extracts lithium, and specifically lithium chloride, from brine. The reason why I mention that is that it is a precursor. Lithium chloride is a precursor for all battery chemicals, being lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate, and even when we move to solid state, the anhydrous version of lithium chloride will come from lithium chloride that we produce. That's what that shows. Next generation. And even if you move into Europe, which is heavily dominated by lithium hydroxide today, highly likely that will get balanced in the near future. So the message is Vulcan is poised to basically pivot as the market needs us. We're not hung up and we're agnostic to the market. And so you will see some of this in hopefully our PFS that we'll release later this year on where we're going to go with the chemicals. But the most important part is the lithium chloride. That's the key. And that's Vulcan technology. And that's what we can produce sustainably, low cost. And we can do that in a way which basically protects the Vulcan business case. Almost there. I just wanted to leave you with a vision of the future. We have discussed this, I think, in the last few AGMs as well. We've had a very strong view about how Vulcan would look to design one and build many. It's an idea used by many, many companies, many, many industries. We've got that blueprint. People should be aware that we've got licenses up and down the Upper Rhine. You know, we've got not just in Landau, we have a number of licenses. We have some in an area called Ludwigshafen with a very well-known company, an industrialist called BSF there that we've got a binding MOU with. And there's also Mannheim, a very industrialized area as well. And then we've got other licenses to the north and south. Important for us is that we would like to demonstrate, and we will demonstrate, how we're going to target lower capex and opex for future phases. That's the task of the team, and we're going to hopefully summarize that in a preliminary feasibility study later this year. We believe that's the right way to demonstrate that, you know, we're not resting on our laurels. Phase one, we'll learn a lot and we'll bring a lot of that into phase two. But that CapEx and OpEx story, that's something that we need to continue challenging ourselves and how we're going to improve both in capital efficiency and also OpEx efficiency. So this is what phase two will look like. It's coming soon to the theatres. We are going to design one. We're going to build many. That targeted improved capital efficiency, that is important. We can build and we can look at synergies from phase one. We can look at how asset integration changes that CapEx profile. And that's really, really important to make sure that we're going to continue using, you know, shareholder, money as best as possible. That product flexibility, though, that's going to be key as well. So we can become a true and genuine lithium company. We can produce hydroxide, we can produce carbonate, or we can produce anhydrous lithium chloride as well. So you'll see that in the second half of the year, and looking forward to providing an update more once we've got that PFS out the door. Probably in summary, in all fairness, transformational probably isn't big enough a word for me where we are in Vulcan. We've now, you know, fully funded our Lionheart flagship project. 2.2 billion has now been secured. You know, that was a combination of excellent debt, equity, and grant. We've got a deep track record, and I really mean this to all my colleagues, not just in Australia, but also in Germany. We've got a team that's been there and done that and delivered these type of projects. So I have a lot of confidence in the team that we've got delivering this project. We remain bottom of the cost curve. That attractive position, because of that naturally preheated low impurity brine, will always set us apart. We've got a huge resource. It's globally significant. Thank you to our founders for getting that position many, many years ago. It's favourable for us to be able to start to look at how we're going to develop up and down the Upper Rhine, particularly as the demand grows within Europe. We could not ask for more support from government. I really mean that. We've got some of the most supportive government supporters across, you know, both federal, state, and even within the EU. And that strategic tailwind will continue to grab and run with. That growth story, we really believe that's going to become important in a world that continues to need electrification, whether that's mobility, whether that's stationary batteries, it doesn't matter. And the most important part there is that we've got the technology. We've got a bankable DLE technology that most do not have. And last but not least, as mentioned, we will pivot, we will look at market conditions, and we will make sure that we maximize the value as part of that. So very much looking forward to updating you guys in 12 months again in what we've done. Yeah, very, very proud to be the CEO of Vulcan and looking forward to delivering in 2026. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chris. Well, that really was a transformational year, and I mean, just from a personal perspective, amazing to get to this point after what has been an 8-year journey, and to be building really an amazing feeling. I'll now proceed with the formal items of business set out in the notice of meeting. The minutes of the last meeting of the company held in January 2026 have been signed, and a copy can be made available for inspection from the company secretary. We now move to the formal business as set out in the notice of meeting. As this meeting is being conducted as a hybrid meeting, shareholders can ask questions on the resolutions put to the meeting and general in nature. To submit a question online, click on Ask a Question and follow the prompts. I will sort of go to the room first, and then I'll go to online questions next on each item. The notice of annual general meeting is to be taken as read. Voting on the resolution will be conducted by poll. For the purposes of the poll, I appoint Flynn Mitchell of Automic, the company's share registry, who has examined and prepared summaries of the proxy forms received, to act as a returning officer and to conduct the poll. Those shareholders in attendance that are entitled to vote on the poll are all shareholders, representatives, and attorneys of shareholders and proxy holders who hold yellow voting cards. If anyone believes they are entitled to vote on this poll and have not received a voting card, please see a member of our share registry. To cast your vote, please select the voting drop-down menu on the right-hand side of the screen and follow the prompts to record your voting direction. Voting online is now open. Reminder that once submitted, your vote cannot be changed. At the appropriate time, I will ask that you mark your vote for the resolution on the yellow voting card. If you are a shareholder or proxy holder and wish to cast your votes on the resolution, please place a mark in either the for, against, or abstain box next to the resolution. After the resolutions have been read and voted upon, a representative of our share registry will collect your card. Proxies have been inspected, and all those validly lodged have been accepted. Proxies have been received and represent approximately 190 million shares, or 40% of the issued capital of the company. All undirected proxies or open votes that have nominated the chair of the meeting as their proxy will be cast in favour of the resolution in the notice of annual general meeting. We will now proceed to the resolutions set out in the notice of annual general meeting. There are 7 resolutions to be considered by the meeting. Further details for all resolutions are contained in the notice of meeting dated 24th of April 2026, and the proxy votes will be displayed on the screen. So resolution 1 is adoption of the remuneration report. That, for the purposes, should be on the screen, so I won't read it all out. Does anybody from the room wish to ask a question? Resolution 1. I don't see any from the room. I see one online questioning why the proxies, the proxy advice wasn't disclosed by the company. So that's from, yeah. So I mean, our position on that, we obviously engage with proxy advisors in the lead up to this. We've taken on board their advice over the years, and have had I think a sort of continuous improvement and good positive engagement there. We don't pay for proxy reports, so my understanding is we're actually not allowed to share that ourselves publicly. And I think our position is we don't really want to pay proxy firms, because that also sort of compromises independence somewhat as well. But in any case, the feedback that we've had from proxy advisors that we're aware of for this year has been uniformly positive. We're not aware of any negative proxy advice for any of the resolutions. If anybody is aware, please let us know. I'm happy always to take on the feedback. But as far as we're aware from the advice that we've had from that early engagement, all proxies have advised in favour of all resolutions. So any other questions? 1 second, I'm just going to manage this system. There's some general questions. What I'll do is I'll get to those at the end. I don't see any other questions on resolution 1. So if all shareholders have now voted on that one, then we'll go to resolution 2. So the next one is re-election of Director Francis Verdeen, which is myself. Does anybody wish to ask a question on that? Nothing from the room. I don't see any online. I assume everyone has now voted. So I'll move on to the next one. Resolution 3, re-election of Director Ms. Josephine Bush. Does anybody wish to ask a question? From the room, I don't see anything online. Matt? So I assume everyone has now voted. Thank you. Resolution 4, election of Director Mr. Roberto Gallardo. Does anybody wish to ask a question? No? Thank you. Assume everyone has now voted. Thank you. Resolution 5, issue of performance rights to Mr. Chris Marino. Does anybody wish to ask a question? I don't see anything online either. So we'll move on to the next one. Assume everyone's voted. Thank you. Resolution 6, issue of performance rights to Ms. Felicity Gooding. Does anybody wish to ask a question? Again, I don't see any online or from the room. Assume everyone has voted, so thank you. Resolution 7, increase in total aggregate remuneration for non-executive directors. Does anybody wish to ask a question? Nothing from the room. Nothing online. Okay, yeah. Apologies, that was missed off my business of the meeting, but to receive and consider the annual report of the company for the financial year ended 31 December 2025, including the declaration of the directors' report, remuneration report, and auditors' report. Did I miss that one out? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
We also have our auditors here who have any questions.
Okay, very good. Any questions for our auditors? No. Thank you very much. There being no further questions, I now put the resolutions to the meeting. Please complete your voting cards and our share registry representative will collect your cards. If you're voting online, please submit your vote now. Good. It appears all voting cards have been collected. I therefore declare the poll closed. Results of the poll will be lodged with the ASX after the meeting. I would like to, there are some general questions just before I close the meeting, so I'd just like to address those. There's some questions around the equity raising being in the AFR Street Talk before a price-sensitive announcement was lodged on the ASX. I'm not actually aware of that, but we'll certainly look into that. That's the first I've heard of that one. There's a question on Mrs. Reinhardt and her relationship with the company. Is she still on the register and engaged with the company? Well, obviously the relationship is actually with Hancock Prospecting, of which Mrs. Reinhardt is the chair. They are very much still on the register and very much an engaged shareholder and very supportive shareholder of ours, and have been so since January 2021. So very grateful for their support. They also supported us on the financing that we just did as well. So continues to be a good relationship there. Where can I find the environmental protection information? There is an environmental study on the project, which is published, I believe, on our website. We can certainly circulate that to shareholders, but there's obviously been a comprehensive environmental study conducted on the Phase 1 Lionheart project, which is freely available online if anybody wants to have a look at that. And we're very proud of the environmental credentials of the project. Obviously, a net carbon neutral project with almost zero waste and very, very low impact on the surface. So absolutely feel free to have a look at that report. We're very proud of it. I think that's it on the questions, but thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now completed the matters contained in the notice of annual general meeting, and I declare the formal meeting closed. and look forward to catching up for some refreshments afterwards and having a chat. Thanks very much, everyone. And thanks to our directors online who participate online as well, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks, everyone.